We'll be talking about Friday the 13th. Of course, today's Friday the 13th, and we'll get all the superstition and the psychological reasons why we fear today down in the second half of today's program. Theater of the Mind, of course, at the break today in the program as well. And we'll visit with our first guest here in just a moment and let you know what's going on in the first half of the program here in just a second. I want to thank everybody who came out to the Chicago Ghost Con this past weekend. We had a great time out there with Ursula Bielski, Willie Adkins, and the crew out there at Chicago Ghost Con this past weekend. And if you came out to see us this weekend at Chicago Ghost Con, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I had a great time. Unfortunately, Dave couldn't make it out this past weekend as he had a family emergency, but I had a great time meeting everybody, and I ended up getting to host the conference this past weekend, and which was the first for me, and I had a great time and got to learn some stuff as well, and got to visit with a lot of people who I wouldn't have had a chance to visit with. So it was a great experience, and I look forward to doing it again. So again, folks, if you missed it, you missed out on a heck of a time. And if you want to find out where Dave or I are anywhere around the country, or even in the world for that matter, go to darknessevents.com and just click on any of the banners that you see Dave or I appearing at any of those events around the country. And come join us around the country. We'd like to meet you, hang out with you, have a beer with you, whatever we're doing there around the country, whether it be a paranormal investigation, a paranormal conference, or even just an appearance. We'd like to see your smiley face and get to know you and get to know all about you. So be sure to follow us around the country as we take off on our travels and discover new things and new lands. Also, I wanted to mention that IWI, a week from tonight, will take place at the Coon Rapids American Legion here in Minneapolis. IWI, of course, is Independent Wrestling International. I am your vice president and ring announcer. That again at the Coon Rapids American Legion, 7:30 is the bell time there. Tickets are $12 for adults, $8 for kids at the door. Make sure that you show up there and for a great night of family-friendly wrestling. We've got a huge card for you there that next Friday night, a week from tonight, at the Coon Rapids American Legion. So I hope to see you there as well. And that pretty much wraps up everything that I have to say to you guys as far as, plugs. One more thing. I have one more thing. There's another podcast that I'm on this week that I want you guys to check out. Our good friend Jeff Belanger has a podcast that you're going to want to check out. And this isn't going to take much of your time. If anything, it'll take you exactly 8 to 9 minutes. That's it. Just 8 to 9 minutes. The name of the program is New England Legends, and you can find it at iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Roku, and in different outlets. Look for New England Legends, and the episode this week has yours truly in it. Now, I do a little bit of a voice. I'm not going to lie. It's just a little bit of a voice, but Jeff puts it together with his buddy Ray, and it's just little snippets or little stories and legends and spooky legends at that from New England. Check it out. There's a bunch of different episodes up, probably 9-10 legends, and they're amazing. They're great stories. So again, Jeff has this podcast, New England Legends. Check it out if you would, and let me know what you think. Tim at darknessradio.com. As far as my episode, which is up today, as of today, the name of the one that I'm in is called A Vampire in Vermont. So make sure that you check that episode out today. And I've linked it on my social media. So if you go to my Twitter or if you go to my Facebook, you can get a link to that show today and New England Legends, and you can check it out for yourself. So that's all I have to say for that. And check out that podcast and let me know what you think of Jeff's podcast, New England Legends, and let him know what you think of it as well, because he's looking for feedback on it as well. So with that, we will get into today's show. The first half of the program, I am honored to have author Steve Asher, who is a paranormal investigator and folklorist. He publishes through Permuted Press and Simon & Schuster. Steve Asher is a native Kentuckian who loves how the energy of the Southern night affects his writing, and Asher is the father of 6 children and loves both music and exploring new and strange locations. His new book actually takes on the Western Lunatic Asylum, and we'll be talking to him in the first half of the program today about that asylum. Steve, welcome into Beyond the Darkness. How are you today?
Hey, Tim, I'm doing great, man. I really appreciate you having me on. And, it's got that kind of vibe, Friday the 13th. It's a spooky time. And, it was really funny. I had actually was able to get my first televised, book related interview today. And I was like, of all days, but it went really well. And, I'm doing really well. I was thinking of 2 things that you had mentioned as you were doing your intro. And, it's strange when you talk to people, it's one of those things, you ever seen those memes where it's like, okay, what I think we look like, what everybody else thinks we look like, and how we really do.
Right.
Like that. But I really feel like in the highest mind of investigators, I feel that we do feel like we're stepping out into other realms and in the best sort of how do I say it? Best sense of community. You do find that commonality with all these different groups, and you branch out into other regions and things like that. And I think that's great. And I'm really proud you guys are doing that, especially up around Chicago. My wife's family was from around the South Side and stuff. And and like I said, it's something you need to see more of.
Absolutely.
You definitely need to see.
Absolutely. And Chicago is kind of it's a second home for me. And Dave originally is from the Chicagoland area. So it's one of those things where I look forward to at least once a year, if not twice a year, going back to that area and checking it out. And even, what was amazing is that Friday night is Ursula Bielski took us out on this haunted tour of Chicago, and Chicago has such a rich paranormal history.
Oh, sure.
And to be able to take that in, even just as a spectator, not even doing an active investigation, but sometimes, and this too, as an active investigator, if sometimes you can just kind of put the tools down and just be an observer and just kind of take it in like everybody else takes it in for the first time with open eyes and open ears. It's kind of fun just to hear the narrative and see everything and kind of take everything in for the first time, without having to, look at a meter or look through a camera or, kind of take everything in with your senses in a different perspective, to kind of just hear the story and the narrative and put yourself in that moment, I think it kind of brings you back to being a kid, which I like. I like taking the haunted tours and seeing it in that perspective sometimes much more than actually investigating a place.
No, I would totally agree. I mean, and for me, it is that, and I catch myself wording things because I don't want to say it and make it come off goofy, but in the best sense of the word, voyeuristic. It doesn't mean it's got to be something dirty, because like I said, with growing up, especially in Western Kentucky, most people know about Kentucky. They know Lexington, they know Louisville, they know Frankfort, they know of the Appalachians, and not so much about Western Kentucky, because Western Kentucky connects more with like lower Tennessee. Obviously Tennessee right next to us, Missouri and Southern Illinois, and so we have a little bit more of a Midwest feel, but still very much steeped in that Southern Gothic feel. And I'm the same way. It's sort of like, as I'd mentioned before, I've been a musician for years, and it's one of those things. Sometimes you go to a show and you watch and enjoy another band, and you're not sitting there. I mean, sometimes it's hard to pull yourself out of that to go, okay, I could see maybe they should have put a little bit longer, tighter bridge on that, or something like that. Okay, well, I can see where they're getting ready to go into this part of the song, or okay, yeah, obviously they're going to build it and drop it, and so, and to be able to do that, like you said, you get to relive in some small way that fascination and that allure that brought you into this, and it's great. I love that, because like you said, when you get so into it. And I've caught myself doing that writing as well. I've always been a pretty voracious writer or reader. And once you get into the writing shtick and all that, hey, you're working so dang much trying to get the books together and research this. And that's one of the things that if you don't want to if you want to be a ghost, paranormal investigator, ghost hunter, what do you want to call yourself, a folklorist or a historian, they're all going to intermingle. And it's just that way. You can't study a place properly and really know the bones of a place without knowing its history and without, reading over, like in the second book, as we talked about the Western Lunatic Asylum, which is still a functioning facility. It's now known as the Western State Hospital. Okay. This was a situation where, I'll explain that more in a minute. But basically, more or less, like you said, if you can find that, it's kind of like that Christmas moment, or it's sort of like that, when you left from being a little kid to get in the presents, then you are given the presents necessarily. It's almost like a revisit to that, to where you you get to get a touch of that gift, and you watch these people do their thing, and especially if they have that storyteller element, it draws you in, and it's not a job, it's a whole experience. You get to feel the whole experience of it. And we have ghost walks. I live in Princeton, Kentucky. And we have ghost walks and stuff, and it's slowly getting kind of there because it is sort of a Bible Belt, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, they're very slow to change, and they're very, like, okay, where's this guy coming from? Because I grew up here, like I tell everybody that interviews me, hey, obviously I can't shut up. But it's a thing where, I grew up, you're familiar with the Trail of Tears. The Trail of Tears ran through here. Right. And my great grandmother on my father's side actually was on the Trail of Tears. Her mother died, and she was adopted into a white family. And I've always visited down there because I always felt a connection with my great grandmother there. And I would be in there wading through her, getting crawdads or crayfish, whatever you call them, up your way. But and catching little, what do you call them, water spiders and stuff. Just, that was our PlayStation, as the saying goes. But and I've always felt very connected with that, and I've been very, very lucky that, especially the people in this area, if you just come out, okay, what was the Ghostbusters expression? Ray, you're scaring the straights. I've always tried to go say, look, guys, I grew up in your schools, most of the time I grew up in your churches. Heck, they know us as, we adopt and care for especially these children. So there's a whole other side to us. But whenever I would write, I'm not telling people that that's a ghost. I'm not telling people it's anything, because I don't know who God's name. Who am I to say? I'm not a demonologist. I'm not a this or that. I've studied, quite extensively for the last 20 something years, but I have no what would you call pedigree through the Catholic Church or anything like that, which is really where the demonologist, the classic term demonologist comes from. And I know there's a lot of very learned people. Sure. And I'm probably on the cusp of the less knowledgeable, but I'm trying. But it's one of those things I always try to be as genuine as I can with it and say, look, just the facts. This is what was seen. This is what was felt. Okay, researching, this is what I found was possibly connected with it. Or sometimes I'm like, I have no explanation for this.
Well, let me ask you this, Steve, because as a researcher, and I want to go back a little bit to the feelings you get when you first discover a place, as opposed to when you become a researcher and you're writing a book about a place and really getting into the guts of a place. It seems to me that when you first discover or investigate a place, there's a wonderment or there's a sense of emotion attached to it. Am I wrong, or am I off base by saying when you become a researcher, you really have to detach your feelings and become more objective towards a place when you start to research it?
Well, sure. And there's a element of, just like anything, and not to romanticize what I do, but or any of us that does, research, there's a certain honeymoon period. Oh, we found a new location, or hey, did you hear what happened here? Oh, that's really neat. Let's check it out. And there's all that. And then by the time you've read through X amount of, papers about this and that, or X amount of, newspaper articles about certain things that happen in situations or whatever. You do have to detach yourself enough to try to keep it plausible and try to keep it believable and close to the facts. Because understand, the first book, The Hauntings of the Kentucky State Penitentiary, and the Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum, both are released as fiction based on actual events. Mm-hmm. Obviously, because both of these institutions are functioning and still have people in them, inmates in one and patients in the other, and you want to try to go in there with the, and again, I'm trying to word this where I don't sound disingenuous, with the mindset of, look, this is a story. I'm writing stories that people have told me. Now, the prison I worked, 7 years, a total of 10 years in corrections and law enforcement. But Western State, that was a different animal. I was able to go purely on insights from former, current staff. Some did provide me with what photographic evidence they could that would not have, mainly outside stuff that would not compromise HIPAA laws of these people. And I understand that. So it was like I said, it's again, you gather it, and you may have like a certain walk or a certain area that might have 2 or 3 different incidences happen. You can't write 2 or 3 different stories. You kind of combine that for a bigger bang. But like I said again, but all those elements did happen or reportedly happen. So, but yeah, you're gonna get, I don't want to say jaded, mm-hmm. but you're going to have that thing of time to make the donuts. There's what you're doing, and I studied criminal justice. That's what I was studying for my degree, and so I do have to break it down scientific method. I have to break it down into a grid situation if I'm checking something out. You don't want to contaminate evidence. You don't want to. You want to rule out all the, the basics. Everybody knows this. You would think, but if you've done it for any time, and yeah, like I said, there is a business suit that you put on. But if you're lucky, you can still get that rush, get that thrill, and a lot of times it's again like, okay, I've seen all this, I've got all these stories, I've spoke to them, got all the information, cleared it, and then it goes into the book. Okay, now that I've discovered, here, you check this out. And that's what's great. Like after I wrote the first book, I was having people go, it's really strange. I work up on whatever, Forsyth House or something. I've been on those walks before. I felt the same thing. I thought it was me because no one really talks about it. I don't know how many people in law enforcement that you deal with, mm-hmm. but they're pretty kind of stoic. I mean, don't be wrong. Right. You can be very funny guys. And gals, very bawdy and stuff. And there's a kind of a gallows humor. I don't care if you're an EMT, if you're a police officer, if you're a jailer, corrections officer, morticians. You would think would be very kind of dour and kind of not have any joke, but they have kind of a grave digger's humor to deal with the stresses of seeing and dealing with the things that they deal with. But like you said. There is a certain thing of going, well, we just don't talk to the public about this. And that's kind of very much, I think, I don't know if maybe it's more of a Southern thing too, because I think it's like, well, we just don't talk, especially if somebody had died, hung themselves, something like that. It's kind of like, well, we don't speak of the dead and you don't really talk bad. And I understand that. But, if someone's having a haunting due to this, obviously there's some unfinished business, or there's some reason that they're there, that they're coming to people. They're not at rest. You're not stirring something up. And understand, I'm from the school of don't go in there and stir, like I said, agitate these things, whatever they are. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't want somebody coming to my house, yelling at me and telling me to get out and all this come at me bro stuff. I think that's kind of cartoonish and dangerous. And I've only dealt with 1 or 2 things that really scared me. And I'm not saying like I'm a bad, tough guy or something, but, but there's a handful of things I went, no, let's get out of here. No. And, but basically, you pretty much know if you're walking up on something that you can either call it negative energy, negative entity. If you want to use the term demonic, that's fine. But, I try not to pigeonhole it into one thing. But, when you do, you know it. It doesn't take long. I think it was Father Malachi Martin that said you can talk to some entity or a person that is connected with something demonic, and you know it. You're going to know it, and you're going to know it in 30 seconds. And I go a lot on gut feel with stuff, and I know that doesn't sound that flies completely in the face of what I'm saying, of being scientific about it. But when you're in situations like prisons and stuff, you don't know what's around that corner. And I'll tell you, if the corner doesn't feel right, I don't go around it.
All right. Our intrepid army of darkness, you're always asking Tim and I for advice. What's our favorite podcast? What's our favorite ghost hunting equipment? What's our favorite scary books? What's our favorite show to watch? And we've got a new one to talk to you about, Lore. It's a creepy 6-episode series on Amazon Prime Video. And Tim, you turned Beyond to the Lore podcast, which was phenomenal. And it kind of helped to inspire us for our Theater of the Mind segments that we do on Friday. And how long have you been listening to it? For a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
And you get some great scares from this, and that's because he covers some of the most unbelievable stories. And the scariest stories are the true ones. Amazon Prime's exclusive Lore is a chilling 6-episode anthology series from one of the executive producers of The Walking Dead and one of the executive producers from The X-Files. It's based on the podcast phenomenon that has had over 70 million downloads. They've got creator and narrator Aaron Mahnke as he explores the most terrifying tales throughout history. And each of these uniquely creepy episodes, they take a myth that's rooted in historical folklore, and then they twist it, exposing timeless terrors that still haunt us today. Real life can scare you to death. Don't miss out on this. It starts this Friday, the 13th. What a better day to start a creepy show like this than Friday the 13th, Tim. Did you get a chance to see the little teaser that they sent to us?
Oh, yes, I did.
God, does this thing look good? I mean, this is unbelievable. It's this kind of a unique mixed media blend. They've done this like archival footage, animation, reenactments, and the scariest stories are true. They're really cool. Check it out for yourself. Amazon.com/lore, Lore. That's www.amazon.com/lore. You guys love what you hear on our show. Trust me, you're going to love what you see with the brand new show on Amazon Prime. Lore begins this Friday, the 13th. On Amazon Prime. Go check it out for yourself and join our ever-expanding army of creepiness. This show is going to bring the goods. That we can promise you.
Steve, I got a kind of a different question for you, and that being, you've written the first book on the Kentucky State Penitentiary. This one's about the Western Lunatic Asylum. I want to ask a question more about the living people surrounding it, more than necessarily the dead. And you're talking about this gallows sense of humor that the workers seem to have in the penitentiary. I'm wondering who tends to be more believers in the paranormal. Is it the corrections officers you find at the penitentiary, or is it the workers you find at the lunatic asylum? Who tends to be the ones who tend to believe more in this stuff or tend to lend more of a credence to this stuff? Which workers?
Well, I'll tell you, it's something that I've noticed, and maybe it's just a different slice of life. Just people come from different backgrounds, and this is not a slight on anybody or a pat on the back to anybody. It's just something I observed. A lot of folks that come to the penitentiaries, a lot of times those guys were farmers or maybe factory workers, somebody that's, trying to get some sort of state health care for their family. They're there just kind of hand to mouth a lot of times initially, because usually you get through the first 5 years of working in the penitentiary, most people stick around. But a lot of times folks that are working directly with patients, and a lot of them there were special needs, or I don't hate to use the term criminally insane, but a lot of them, some of them are violent, obviously, just like at the pen. But a lot of the folks there, I noticed, almost felt like it was sort of their, be it godly mission. They didn't have a God complex, but they felt, I went to school, I trained for this, I got the education, and my heart is that I want to see these people cared for. And it's not, you know what I'm saying? It's not a lunatic asylum now. Let me be very clear of that now.
Sure.
This funny stuff kind of happen sometimes still, and situations go sideways real quick. Sure, that will happen in any place, but almost 99% of anybody that I spoke with takes their job seriously, and regardless if they've seen stuff or not. And understand, I might have. Let me see. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Say if I had, and I actually have my book because, like I said, it's not printed yet. The second book's not out. I have like 35 chapters and a conclusion. Say that's 35 stories. And so if I push together one or two stories that happen in the same area, say let's make that 60 to 90. Okay, that's the ones who talked. That's the ones that felt strongly enough that they wanted to share something that's just been bugging them. They might have been carrying this for 20 years, regardless of what they feel about the location. Mm-hmm. Because I know people's like, you know what, I've gone to this church my whole life. I'm a believer, whatever. He says, but this one area has never felt right. Or this one location just outside, maybe past the old graveyard has never felt right. I don't know what it is, but it's just strange. But yeah, that's what you're going to find. There's a little bit of sort of a different mindset. That being said, I know a lot of officers who go in there. When I went in there, I was like, look, you know what? I have children, and I know a lot of Kentucky State Penitentiary has the worst of the worst, just bar none. We have gang members from out of state, all this and that. We're the only Supermax in Kentucky. Or they are the only Supermax in Kentucky. Sorry, old habits. But so there are a lot of those guys saying, you know what? I'm not here to punish these guys. These walls punish them. If I count them, they're here. They don't kill each other. They don't kill me. They don't get over a wall and kill a person. My job's done. And they have almost sort of almost a nightly feel. I've done my tour today. I'm going home. All is well. And so it's just a different feel. And but that being said, both of these facilities are older facilities. The Victorian era, because like I know Western State Hospital, which was the Western Lunatic Asylum, come like really into being officially in 1854. Now, let's take it like a step back. This is during the time when, a lot of times special needs babies weren't allowed to live. It was just a different time. At the time that Western State Hospital was the Western Lunatic Asylum, that's in a small town called Hopkinsville, Kentucky. It's got about 31,000 people. It's the county seat of Christian County. And at the time, actually still now, but the facility is on what is considered outskirts of the county. They had the Western Lunatic Asylum. Probably within 1,000 feet was the county poorhouse for folks that couldn't pay their taxes or this and that, and also / orphanage. And what happened was, over time, the county poorhouse was dissolved, and then a lot of the ones that could not function went into Western Lunatic Asylum. So it's this strange, you kind of push your, I guess, societal refuse in that time, in their mind, in their mindset. Mm-hmm. Well, because everybody wants a prison, but they don't want it in their neighborhood.
Right.
Everybody wants the money from it, but they don't want to look at it. Yep. And same thing with the prison. It was, up kind of a way up on a hill, and it's off. It's sort of its own entity. And but both facilities have vines running through the counties, several counties away. Almost everyone has someone who's worked at one of the facilities, had family in one of the facilities, or they themselves have worked at the facility, or in some fashion, shape, had business dealings with it. So for Western Kentucky, these are, very large linchpins of our communities. And it's a lot of times, because everybody's like, oh, we're going to go check out Eastern State, penitentiary. We're going to go check out, there's another Western Lunatic Asylum, which is out in Washington. And people's like, oh, have you been able to go go in and investigate. It's like, no, there's still people there. It's like, it's still open. I'm like, yeah. So again, 20 years behind. Which, and again, in its own way is not the worst, because, the people like a little bit slower life. It's great. But yeah, there's definitely a timing to both those facilities. And, both had like running tunnels under them. This is a Victorian time, and if there was problems going on, and if there's, say, a death in a cell house or death on a ward, they would run them down the death chute or the death wall, kind of like at Waverly.
Yeah.
Most people know Waverly, okay,
right.
And Waverly's cool, and I'm down with it. But like, it's one of those things. It's like, there's so many places right here. I can take you to gobs of different locations where everything from suicides, triple murders, cult, like satanic worship's going on, baby killing, fed to hogs, all this insane, gnarly stuff is just in the hills and hollers of Western Kentucky, or hollows, sorry. So it's such a strange thing that I never knew it growing up here.
Let me stop you right there, Steve. Why such insane behavior inside a lunatic asylum? I know that sounds like an oxymoronic question, but why are the inmates running the asylum, so to speak? Why are you finding such insane behavior by the administration?
Well, yeah. Well, now you're talking about currently. I don't think it's like that anymore.
No, not currently, but in its history.
Well, I think that at the time, just like, hey, this guy has whatever. Let's put an ice pick in his eye and give him a lobotomy. This is brilliant. It's going to fix the problems. He's not acting silly anymore. He drills down to his shoes, craps his pants, but you know what? He's not a problem anymore. And as barbaric as it sounded, it was like, oh, now they're manageable. It wasn't like, let's try to help them and cure them. It was indicative of the times. At the penitentiary, there's still, a block for a whipping post and still chains on the walls in the old dungeons. I've seen them. And it's just, it's, what I'm saying? It's telling. It's very telling. If you go past the kitchen, even though it's been kind of painted over and stuff, you can see where one kitchen entrance says whites only, Negroes only, their terms. And so that was, again, the product of the time and the mentality of the time. And I think they were thinking that they were trying to help them. And I do think that also, just like at the pen, the hiring practices were different. They didn't have the training. You have to go through like many hundreds of hours of training as a correctional officer. I think it's even longer now than when I was there. You would get up there and you'd do probably about a month, and it might be longer now, up in Frankfurt or Louisville. So they were like, okay, well, let me explain this. My father had worked at the penitentiary before I did back in the 50s. Okay. And they hired him in, kind of a young, I don't want to say Barney Fife-ish guy, but he was a thin string beanie guy. Actually was he was a son of a convict. My grandfather had been in there for bootlegging probably 30 years before that. And yeah, it's strange how, like I said, you get an officer, you get an inmate, what do you end up with? A writer. So, but they basically said, okay, Asher, here's a stick, there's a hill. Keep an eye on stuff. That's how it was. That was your training. You learned on the job. And there's an element of that even now, at least at KSP, because KSP runs by its own rules to a point. And what I mean is, the old term of, this is just how we've always done it. There's still a bit of that. And I'm not saying it's like it was then, but obviously there's any place that's sort of off by itself, there's going to be not as much watching for oversight and things. That's just going to happen. That's just a fact. That's just a fact to it. And but why they did that? Like I said, just like the ice baths, just like all that, the shock treatment, they were starting to move away from the purging. This is definitely well past, bleeding them and putting leeches on them and all that stuff, like the SNL stuff. Get them a leech, that type of stuff. It's way past that. But they were just like, oh, electricity. This is new. It's a wonder cure. Oh, here, let's shoot them up with cocaine. This will do it. If he's depressed, give him cocaine. He'll be happy for a while. Or he'll grind his teeth and paint his house 3 times in a week. But hey,
I think we all would be a little happy for a while, but after that, we'd come down.
Right, and I'm sorry, and then you're going to have such a devastating crash. They're going, oh well, he needs more laudanum, or he needs more cocaine. Mm-hmm. And just like, not to get off into people pushing antidepressants, but even now, it seems like it's like, here, take a pill, you're good, there you go, buddy. And it just sort of seems like history repeats itself to a point, but thank God not to the extremes, which obviously there still are, at least, especially coming through the 80s and the 70s and 80s. I remember them going into like different asylums here in the U.S. And I mean, I'm not talking Russia or Ukraine or nothing like that. And you'd see people sitting there in their own filth and just rocking in chairs, like 15-year-old kids, their heads shaved, and they're just bumping their heads against posts. It still happened. But what that is, that's like a ghost of how it was every day. Mm-hmm. In the lunatic asylum at the time. And, and that's what it kills me. It really bothers me, especially caring for special needs children. This book hit me different. Like I said, the first book was, okay, all that crazy stuff because I saw stuff, shadows moving in the hallways and caught things on the cameras moving and stuff like that. But then it was more of a validation of all the different people saying, okay, yeah, we saw this. And that's one of the things I said. I said, I want this to be out. So it's like, here, tell them all that this really happened. The lunatic asylum book was different because it was just so sad to think that these people lived and died in there, sometimes just due to the fact that they were institutionalized. They were put into a workhouse or a poorhouse or an orphanage, and were not stimulated mentally and not given. They missed all those landmarks and all those watershed moments of your development. And once that passes, your SOL, it's gone. And
this may seem like a bit of an insensitive question, but I'm going to make it very blunt. You've investigated a penitentiary where these souls might have been a bit evil even. These souls may have been, people who have had bad intentions, but now you've investigated a place where these souls might have truly been either mentally ill or tortured. Now, with the souls that you've just investigated, is there a difference between these souls that might have been mentally ill or tortured and I'll say ordinary garden variety souls? Are you finding that the activity is different or the behavior is different, and how so?
Well, I would say yes, it is different. It would be like, let me think about it, in just a simple country boy sort of way, as I would put it.
Yeah.
It would just be like, okay, you put 2 scoops in your coffee, it's medium, maybe medium grade coffee. Mm-hmm. You put 4 or 5 scoops of your coffee, the end result's going to be a much darker, more bitter, stout blend. And that's what you find. You funnel that much pain on top of a person that's already, and when I use the words deranged, I'm saying it with all due respect. You could take a person who was a genuinely meek, passive individual. You back a rat into a corner. I'm not comparing these people to rats, but right. I'm saying you back a rat in a corner. If it doesn't have an out, it will fight you, and it will do what it has to survive, because survival instinct is, that's lizard brain stuff. Mm-hmm. Hopefully, I think we all have it, and that's the thing. Again, not to compare my life to the stories, but again, it's very tightly wound. When our oldest boy, who had he passed away a year or 2 back, and we had gotten him from an orphanage in Thailand, and by the time we got him, he was 8. And when we first got him, he would have a lot of behaviors, a lot of scratching, a lot of biting, things like that, kind of destroying stuff, and almost like to sort of dominance, but also to kind of go, well, you're going to leave like everybody else leaves, just that sort of push you away thing. And it basically, like, for every for more or less, or let's say every year that a person has been in an institution, you're going to work probably 3 or 4 months to try to squash those behaviors and those learned expectations and those triggers, to see those triggers. And like I said, it took us years. Took us literal years to get him to where, he was, pretty well in school. He was a Special Olympian, and I don't mean to go into that, but these folks did not have that. These folks did not have the nurture and the just the break from the constant stress and hellish impact of this guy's over here banging his head into the wall. This one's, this woman's over here cutting herself. This one's over here trying to strangle one of the other people, or someone's trying to molest him or something. And that's what you can understand is, there's stories in here that talks about, people that do like Ouija work, which I know guys like, Tim Shaw and stuff like that have had extensive study in that. I've not. I don't play with them. I've been qualified in a whole lot of different weapons as a shooter, but I'm not going to hand it to a baby, and which is what I am when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those deals where we had some people that were in there, and they were playing around in what they call a hydrotherapy room. Hydrotherapy was back in the days where they would put them into a tub and basically have like a rubber piece that goes over the top to keep either the heat of the warm water in it or cold water. It wasn't always ice baths. That because you're going to kill somebody, you give somebody an ice bath, full on ice bath, right. But quite chilled water, and they keep putting a certain amount of ice on the rubber part so it pushes the heat down, or dissipates it. So anyway, they were in there playing with a Ouija board. Well, and they got to the point where they were slowly starting to get some answers, slowly started getting some comments, back and forth, to the point where it freaked them out, to where you started feeling like stuff's in the room. Well, it was 2 ladies, and she said, "Look, I'm done. This is too freaky for me." Well, the other one really connected with this thing, and to the point where, you've heard of like fascination, oppression, possession, all the different kind of steps of, I don't know how much you know about supposed possession and stuff, but anyway, it was a thing where she really connected with it, to the point where she would sneak the board in, and on her breaks go and set up in the hydrotherapy room. And these 2 ladies, which they were a couple, the one person had to go visit her mother. She'd been ill, and while that was going on, she spent most of her time on the board at home and then went in there. Well, she come back unexpectedly. I'll just kind of give a quick, synopsis of the story. She come back to surprise her. They kind of had some words, about this, and went to meet her for lunch. She was not where she was supposed to be. She knew, just had a bad feeling. She ran to the hydrotherapy room. Water was all over the place. It's just, the candles, because she set up candles. It was just really weird. What, this isn't right. Went out, found her. It was sort of a foggy night, because in the South, when it's about, fall, there's a lot of water here, a lot of lakelands and stuff. So it gets very foggy. It's just what it is. It's kind of like Seattle or something, but with banjo music. So anyway, the lady said she come out there, and she was about half in and out, and she looked at her, her eyes were almost blood, like, you ever seen somebody who's been like choked out really bad, or had violently been shaken around the throat? Okay. Your eyes were getting kind of raccoony, around it where it was bruising, and she had this stuff to her neck, where her neck was really like just had the hell beat out of her, pardon my language. But and she said, "Well, what's going on?" She said, it started forming out of the smoke from the candles, and I was just so into it, and I kept talking to it, and then the room started dimming down, and then I felt something go around my neck, and so I thought, oh, well, this thing's choking her. And it says, no, what it was like in hindsight, it was almost like a wet towel, like kind of like an old rough towel that's not really been laundered right. It's kind of prickly. And she said it was like it was wrapped up, like, like in gym class or something. People roll it up and pop each other in a hind end back in the day, like in middle school or something. Yep. Anyway, like that, but it was wet, so it was round up real tight and tied it around her neck like it was a garrote type thing, and it was choking her to the point it lifted her off the ground.
Ooh.
And she ended up saying some prayer or something, ended up, boom, it dropped her, and she took out of there. Well, that's freaky enough. And come to find out, talking to people, that there was a woman years ago that it was said that she had passed away. Then some people said, well, that she hung herself. But then there was also that alternate story. No, someone killed her in that hydro room. So again, and that was one of those, I do not know what happened. I can't verify anything, but that in itself is a very freaky story. And that's where story kind of blends into folklore, blends into urban legend, blends into, that thing. And that's why I always tell people, look, take this as a story, as hopefully a good read. Hopefully it's going to make you not want to leave your, not keep the lights off, maybe want to close your closet door. And I don't want people to have restless nights, but I can't lie. I love that. When it comes and says, Jesus, man, there's no way I'm going to go down. I read this. I could go to the bathroom. I'm going to say, no, man, don't. I've sat there and turned every light on in the house. I had music playing, and I was just like, I'm sorry, but I'm so not sorry.
Well, if people want to have a few restless nights, Hauntings of the Western Lunatic Asylum is available for pre-order right now at SimonandSchuster.com. SteveEasher.com is your web page or your website for people who are interested. Steve, we're running short on time, my friend, but please, can we have you back to talk a little bit more about the book as we get closer to the release date?
Absolutely. And like I said, I appreciate you guys always being in my corner with stuff. And I'm so glad. I don't know if you remember my other appearance. I was having some spooks or boogers, or what do you want to call it? That's what we call them down here.
Yes.
Boogers and haints. That's what they're called.
Yep.
But playing with my radio or my headpiece. So it seems like it's working better. But
it is.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'll be back anytime you guys need me. And not to sound sappy, I love you guys. You guys are some of the most solid guys in the business, and you're very genuine, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Steve. Folks, it's time now to go from one creepy tale to another. Let's make our transition. It's time for this week's edition of Theater of the Mind.
This week's Theater of the Mind is brought to you by Amazon Prime exclusive Lore, a chilling 6-episode anthology series beginning today on Amazon Prime exclusive, reminding you that the scariest stories are true. Tonight's Theater of the Mind, Chad Irwin and the real-life werewolf encounter of Austin, Texas. Let me start by saying I just turned 40, and this event happened when I was around 13 years old, and I'm still haunted by it to this day. Growing up with an older brother, I was usually the one that had to go do this or go do that, as my brother knew he could make me do things he didn't want to. Well, one night my brother had a friend staying over, and we were up goofing around until 11 or midnight, when suddenly my brother says, "Hey, Chad, go down to that cute girl's house and look in her window and see if they're still awake." I, as usual, said, no. Then I was told that Keith, my brother's friend, would go with me. So we slid open the window to my brother's room and quietly rustled ourselves out the window and scurried down the street. We lived in a typical neighborhood that backed up to a large forest area at the bottom of our street. We made our way to the cute girl's house, but their light was off. We assumed that they were probably asleep, so we started to make our way back home. We got to the corner where our street meets hers, and there, looming right in front of us, was the deep, dark, large forest. Keith bumped my arm and said, "Do you see that?" I said, "See what?" Then he slowly raised his hand and unfurled his pointing finger, directing my attention to 2 large, overgrown evergreen trees in a neighbor's yard. At first I was confused. Why was he pointing to a stupid set of trees? That's when I saw it. There, between the trees, what appeared to be a good 7 to 8 feet up off the ground, we saw 2 red, glowing eyes. Yes, red, glowing eyes. There was no doubt. We both froze, not really knowing what to even think, surrounded by the sound of the wind that seemed to be picking up. Then Keith said, "Look at that," and motioned skyward. It was the biggest, brightest full moon I have ever seen to this day. It had to have been like a harvest moon or something. We slowly turned to look at each other. In a silent moment, our eyes spoke volumes. We turned and began to run up our street. We ran as fast as you could imagine for 2 kids scared out of their minds. At first, all you could hear was 2 frightened boys beating feet up a silent street, but soon we could hear its claws hitting the street like a dog's on a hardwood floor. The thing between the trees was chasing us. I looked back over my shoulder and saw that what was chasing us and running on all 4s was at least 4 feet tall to its shoulders. Oh my God! It looked like a wolf, a massive, rapidly approaching werewolf? As we ran, we could hear its low growl and deep bark as it chased us up our street. I only looked back once or twice more, and each time I began screaming at the top of my lungs. But our cries did not deter it. It just kept coming, snarling, growling, gnashing its teeth. This was like the worst dream that I could have ever had, but it was actually happening to me. We hit the gate, which swung on its rusty hinge. We slammed it and slid the lock bar in place. Then we ran and started banging on my brother's window, screaming, "Open the window! Let us in! Let us in! Open the window!" As we stood there, you could hear this thing on the other side of the gate trying to open it. My brother's window flew open and we both jumped in, shaking and crying. We ran to my mom and stepdad's room, yelling about what had just happened, almost sobbing because we were so scared. My stepfather grabbed his revolver and went out the front door. We could see his eyes open wide, and he was shaking a little too as he went out. But after a few moments, he came back in and said, "There's nothing out there." And then he told us to calm down and just go back to bed. There was no way in hell we were going to go back and sleep in that room, a room that was only 2 to 3 feet away from that gate. And we had forgot to shut the window. We all gathered in the living room and stayed up all night trying to talk about what we had just seen and experienced. But we could never really get our head around what it was and what we saw. In the end, we could only agree that it was a very large werewolf. There was no other explanation that would suffice. We had just narrowly escaped a werewolf. It's just that plain and simple. As if that wasn't unnerving enough, our backyard faced a large creek area that flowed down into those same woods. A few times we would be in the backyard jumping on our trampoline, laughing and having a good time with our large Doberman dog nearby. When we can all remember hearing a deep growl come from the other side of our fence that would scare our dog off from time to time. Later, I moved into that bedroom that used to be my brother's. When he moved out, and now every once in a while, I would hear a large bang on that same window, and even hear the same fence jiggle, but it only happened at night. It would make the hair on my arms and the back of my neck stand up, and I knew what was over there taunting me. I still, from time to time, have bad nightmares about that night, and even hate being outside when the moon is full because I know what's out there. I've seen it. I've been chased by it. Mondays, the Charlie Whiskey Television Network, the CW, brings you to the front line of drama with the new military series, Valor. 2 Special Ops Army helicopters, 2 Special Ops helicopter pilots, breaking boundaries and defying all expectations. Their bravery in the face of impossible odds earned them the Distinguished Flying Cross for valor. But together, they're finding that truth is the first casualty of war. During their last mission, something went wrong. Something no one is talking about. And when they went into the combat zone, not everyone came home. So now they have secrets, but they're also patriots and refuse to leave any man behind. What would you do if you had to break the rules to do what's right? Would you stay grounded and step in line, or go to any lengths to learn the truth? They share secrets, go on clandestine missions, risk life and limb with only each other to depend on. How close would you get to the only person who really knows you? It's the explosive new drama that pushes the boundaries between military discipline and human nature. The new series that's right on target, Valor. New episodes Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, after all new episodes of Supergirl, only on Charlie Whiskey, the CW.
There are 120,000 unsolved murder cases in America.
It was the next day that I found out from my parents what had happened, that my sister was killed.
Each one is called a cold case.
Sometimes you have to look really closely to find the evidence.
Damn, I killed her.
Damn it, I killed her.
Cold Case Files, the podcast.
Garcia is walking into the home of a real monster.
I was nervous. I realized what kind of person I was dealing with.
It's a goosebump moment.
Download new episodes every Tuesday on the Podcast One app, or subscribe at Apple Podcasts or podcastone.com.
Hey, this is Chris Jericho inviting you to the first ever Rock and Wrestling Rager at Sea. Picture this: rock and roll, wrestling, comedy, live podcasting, all on the open ocean from October 27th to the 31st, 2018, from Miami to Nassau. I'm bringing Hall of Fame wrestlers, some of the greatest rock and roll bands on the planet, and putting the first wrestling ring on a cruise ship ever. Don't be a stupid idiot. Make the list. Check us out at ChrisJerichoCruise.com.
Beyond the darkness.
Welcome back to the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm Tim Dennis in for Dave Schrader, who'll be back on Monday. The second half of the program here, we're going to be talking about today. I know that sounds confusing, but today is Friday the 13th. And you may feel a little anxious about that. So to help us through the day today, we have Texas-based Dr. John Huber. He is the chairman for Mainstream Mental Health. It's a nonprofit organization that brings lasting and positive change to the lives of individuals that suffer from mental health issues. A mental health professional for over 20 years, Dr. Huber is a clinical forensic psychologist, and he is a practitioner with privileges at 2 long-term acute care hospitals. In addition, Dr. John Huber is a professor and teaches undergraduate and graduate psychology at Texas State University. Dr. Huber, welcome to Beyond the Darkness, probably one of the programs you never thought you'd appear on, huh?
Well, I love listening to it on the side, so it's actually quite a privilege for me, so I appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate you being with us. You know, a lot of people have that anxiety, the unlucky number, or the, just the plain, I can't deal with the day of this. And this seems to be one of those days, Friday the 13th, the old don't walk under the ladders, don't step on a crack, coming across black cats. I've seen one too many movies with Jason in it. And this tends to be one of those days that people seem to either fear or thrill. And you put it right smack dab in the middle of October, where you have Halloween, and all of a sudden it seems like the anxiety is heightened. Now, let me ask you the first question right off the bat, and that would be, what is it about Friday the 13th that gets people anxious?
Well, I think there's a lot of things. I mean, 13 has for a long time been considered a bad number. I mean, a coven of witches are 12. So what is it when you see 13 witches? Well, the theory is one of them is actually the devil, and you don't know which one it is. So it goes all the way back to that folklore. You also have more modern day. You have Apollo 13. And that's, a story that we see all the time, whether you watch movies or, you talk to your family about, the history. Where were you when they landed on the moon? So these stories get told over and over and over. And it sets us up, and it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy for a lot of people. Oh, no, it's Friday the 13th. And some people actually get nervous worrying about what's going to happen to me. And what they actually do is they create this nervous or anxious state. And because they're already nervous and anxious, they start making little errors in their, as the day goes on, and they end up making some crazy accident or mistake, and they think, oh, it's because of Friday the 13th, when in fact they set themselves up for that error. So it gets reaffirmed.
Now, okay, I'm going to throw some scenarios at you here, Dr. Huber. I'm going to have you walk me through this. Let's just say I'm a guy who things just generally don't go my way in life anyways, okay? Now, automatically, I would think as a psychologist, you would tell me, well, it must have to do with my negative mindset to begin with. But if I sit down with you and I say, Dr. Huber, I can show you in my life where things have gone wrong, and it has nothing to do with my mindset. Are you coming across examples where people are saying it's just not me, it's my circumstances, and that people can prove to you that it's something about the day and not their circumstances? Or is it almost always the fact that people are setting themselves up for this?
Well, let's think of it like this. I work at 2 hospitals, and there are a few things that make the nurses nervous than Friday night with a full moon or Friday night full moon and it's the 13th. Those 2 things, our nurses get so paranoid. What's going to happen in the emergency room tonight? What's going to, And what we've actually done is we've gone through and collected data on the types of injuries that come into the hospital, not just Friday night, but every night of the week. And we've looked at it, and then we pull up the data and actually look at full moons, Friday the 13th, and like that. And what we find out, there's no significant difference from one Friday night to the next Friday night. Now, there is from Friday night to comparing it to, say, Monday night. But Monday night, people just went back to work Monday, and they got to go to work tomorrow. They're not out drinking. They're not staying late. They're not going to clubs. So there's some actual real reasons why that doesn't happen. But when you compare Friday to Friday, over time, there's no difference. What the difference is, when they have that killer night, and all the patients just come in one after another, and they're exhausted, and they're walking out the door at 4 o'clock in the morning. They look up and they see a full moon, or somebody goes, well, that was Friday the 13th. They go, that's why it was so crazy. So it reaffirms that belief set that you had that horrible night because of that, not because that it's just Friday night. Now, another scenario is kind of the same as when you get on an airplane. Everybody flies commercial, sits there, and they, at some point while they're standing in line, before they board, they have this thought, what if this is the one?
Yeah.
And you get on the plane, you fly across the country, not a glitch, no problem. And you do that every day. I talk to people who fly all the time, and they forget about the fact that they say, oops, this might be the one. But then they get on the plane and they fly through a thunderstorm and they have wind shear and they drop 15 feet and their laptop hits the ceiling and they go, I had that feeling before I got on the plane today. I knew something bad was going to happen. But the fact is they'd had it every time they'd flown in the last 5 years, and it finally actually happened. So it reaffirms the belief that that was the cause, that bad feeling.
Let me ask you this. Do you buy into a theory like Mercury retrograde? I know it's come across many times across your desk. Because, people really do, and I see quite a bit, especially in the paranormal community, people really do buy into a period of time where Mercury is in retrograde, where it's, no electronic communication goes haywire. Don't sign any long-lasting contracts during it. Communications between friends and loved ones get misconstrued. Where anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Don't do any major business transactions during that time. Do you buy into that? Do you actually see that as something that is viable, or to you is it just another scapegoat for, you know what, you entered a bad deal? Maybe you just happen to buy a lemon of a computer. Maybe you just are happening to know that that's in the forefront of your mind, and it's just convenient to point to.
Well, sometimes things just don't work out right, and for no obvious reason until you start looking at things like that are beyond our control. So there may be some influence. I mean, come on, think about it. The moon revolves around our planet, and it causes lots of changes in tides, in how game animals act. I mean, my daughter, she's 12 years old. We go fishing. She wants to know where the moon is. So, so to say that Mercury in a specific orbit has absolutely no effect on us at all, I think would be asinine, because we know planets affect other planets. Mm-hmm. So how it exactly affects, I don't think we have enough technology to be able to pinpoint exactly what is going on, but there is some effect in there.
Is it enough to say this is going to affect not only my life, but everybody on the planet, though?
Well, if it affects you, then it goes to make sense that it's going to affect everybody else. It doesn't mean it's going to affect everybody else the exact same way, though. And that's why if we look at the history of Friday the 13th, in some points in history, it was actually considered a good luck day.
When did it change? How did it become such a bad luck day?
Well, what are we if we're not pessimists? It's so much easier to focus on the negative than to focus on the positive. I mean, think about our kids going through school. They get told 1,000 times a day, you need to learn to take consequences and learn to take criticism and change it for the better. But then your kid studies really hard and gets a good grade on a test, and the teacher goes, hey, you did a good job on the test. And the child immediately makes excuses. Oh, it was an easy test. Not, it was an easy test because I studied the last 3 nights for it.
Dr. Huber, I don't know if you know this or not, but where I'm from, we're Minnesota Vikings fans. We're natural pessimists. We've been to 4 Super Bowls and haven't won one of them. And every time
but you're blessed. You went. How many teams have never been?
Have you seen our quarterback situation the last few years?
Okay. I'm not. Come on, man.
We're snake bit, Dr. Huber.
I got friends in Minnesota. Come on.
we're terminally snake bit up here in Minnesota. That's just the way things are.
And believe it or not, I have a good friend, Ken Kramer, who used to be a Viking.
Tommy Kramer?
No, Ken Kramer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, not Tommy. Huh?
Oh, I was going to say, Tommy Kramer? Because I had an interesting story if you did, but obviously.
Well, he also played for the 49ers, too, so this guy. Okay. A great guy, amazing family, and, so I'm sure Tommy's at least the same way, so.
The story I had about Tommy wasn't as great, but I'll tell you. I don't want to leave people hanging, so I'll tell you. It's just a real quick story. So I was, I think I was 10 years old at the time, and wow. I know it was way back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, Dr. Huber, and there was a Tommy Kramer, Ahmad Rashad just went into the Vikings Ring of Fame this past, I think it was last week and the weekend before.
One of my childhood heroes right there, Ahmad Rashad.
Ahmad Rashad, right. And I went to their football camp at McAllister College over in St. Paul.
Really?
Mm-hmm. And
jealous.
I was in the linebacker camp of Scott Studwells, who was a big-time Minnesota Vikings middle linebacker. And I actually was the head of the camp 2 days out of the 5. So, so you got to eat at the table, or you got to eat breakfast with Scott that day. So what was funny was Tommy only showed up for 2 days out of the 5. The first day and the last day. And in both days, he was wearing sunglasses and told you not to talk too loud around him. And he was his cheeks were as red as cherries, Dr. Huber. And us kids couldn't figure out exactly what was going on at the time, but as we got older, we figured out he was hungover.
The Irish flu, huh?
Yes, yeah, that was pretty much what was going on with Tommy Kramer. But everybody else was great. Yeah. So awesome. Later on in Tommy's football career, we found out that the Irish flu affected Tommy quite a bit. So, yeah.
Oh, well, that brings us back to frigatriskaidekaphobia.
What is that?
That is fear of Friday the 13th.
Okay, yes, yeah. Bring us around to that. Now, there are people that actually suffer with that fear.
Yes, truly. And believe it or not, it's actually relatively simple to deal with if you know how.
And how do you deal with it?
Well, there's a couple ways. One of the simplest ones is what we call cognitive desensitization. It's where you go through and you build yourself a hierarchy of fears. What if this happens on Friday the 13th? What if this happens? And you keep building it up till you know you're just going to have a heart attack, right? Mm-hmm. And then you put the list off to the side, and then you start learning relaxation techniques. So you shouldn't wait until Friday the 13th to do this. You should do this, a couple weeks ahead of time. And you learn relaxation techniques that work for you. Somebody it might be progressive muscle relaxation. Another person might be deep breathing, that type of stuff. Everybody is different, so you have to figure out what works for you. And then you start with the lowest level of the hierarchy. And the minute you start feeling the symptomology, the increased heart rate, the hyperventilation, you start getting that nervous giggle, you start using your relaxation technique till it goes away. And then you go to the next level. And you keep doing this, and you learn that you can control that feeling inside, which is actually a sympathetic nervous response from your sympathetic nervous system. And it's the fight or flight mechanism, only there's no real threat there to yourself.
Hey, it's your old buddy Darkness Dave here, and I'm back to remind you of True Car. Remember, if you're in the market looking for a brand new or a previously owned car, True Car will make your purchasing easier than it's ever been before. It will take all of the stigma, it'll take all of the fear, it'll take all of the anxiety you may have about stepping onto a lot to get a new or previously owned car, and it takes it and moves it away. It makes it so much easier. True Car does something that a lot of people don't know. Using True Car can also help you buy a used car. In fact, they've got over 700,000. Think about that, 700,000 pre-owned vehicles that are available right now from True Car certified dealers nationwide. So whether you're looking to buy new or previously owned, you get upfront pricing information that will empower you, discounts off the list price for used cars, and a better buying experience through our True Car certified dealer network. There are over 700,000 pre-owned vehicles available right now through True Car certified dealers nationwide. You'll see what other people paid for the car you want, so you can know what a fair price is and feel more confident. With True Car, you can connect with a local certified dealer of your choosing, so you can enjoy a quick, easy buying experience. Using True Car, you can easily find the new or previously owned car you want. It's never been easier. They've got over 3 million cars that have been sold to True Car users by the True Car certified dealer network. Again, over 13,000 True Car certified dealers nationwide, which means there's going to be one right near you. So when you're ready to buy a new or previously owned car, visit True Car to enjoy a more confident car buying experience. Trust your old pal Darkness Dave. I've been there. I'm going to be there again very soon, purchasing my son's first car. And the only people I'm going to trust to this is True Car. Some features are not available in all states, but when you're ready to make that purchase, visit True Car. This is a special presentation of Beyond the Darkness True Crime Tuesday. We hope you're enjoying it. Remember, you can sign up and hear the best of True Crime Talk Radio every Tuesday delivered directly to you through Patreon. How do you do that? Just go to darknessradio.com and scroll down till you find the banner that says True Crime Tuesday. Click on it and you can subscribe right now. It's only $5. Folks, that's just $1.25 per episode. Not only do you get 4 brand spanking new excellent episodes every month, it gives you access to all of the past archives of the show as well. So if you like what you're hearing on today's episode, you're going to love what you hear with all of the new episodes that we presented. And the best part is you can quit anytime. If you decide it's just not for you, you can stop your subscription. So please go check it out and sign up right now. Visit darknessradio.com. Click on the True Crime Tuesday banner to subscribe.
Now, what is the worst possible thing that can happen from that phobia? Other than, obviously a heart attack, but where could you find yourself or end up finding yourself if you don't deal with it properly?
Well, definitely, the worst thing I think would be something like a heart attack. Another thing that could happen is, if you're really working yourself up on it, and increase your blood pressure, you could actually, have the same kind of problems with hypertension, like a stroke or a very severe heart attack. And if you're driving, that could be very problematic for the people around you too. So, one of the things that I recommend is if you have a history of these things and you didn't have time to go see your therapist, make sure you're riding with somebody else. Let them drive, somebody who doesn't have that fear. And that should get you through most of it. And stay away from, what we typically want to use to calm ourselves down with, alcohol, because it doesn't necessarily give you the coping mechanisms to rationalize and work yourself down from that extreme level of anxiety that you can have.
Dr. Huber, I got to ask you this too. And in your honest opinion, do you think that movies like the Friday the 13th franchise and different horror movies, does it help to give the negative stigma to Friday the 13th or propagate an issue like a phobia of a Friday the 13th?
Well, I should be careful because I talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and now I've got a clown that's stalking me. So
seriously? Really?
Seriously, we can talk about that off the air because I don't want to give the person.
No, right? Yeah, you don't want to give power to that kind of thing. But that's amazing.
Yeah, and I don't want Jason stalking me. So
right.
So I think that there's. I watched Friday the 13th Part 8 the other night. I didn't even know there was a Part 8, and it was a very, there were moments where I jumped because they jump out behind the door kind of thing. But I was laughing so hard. I mean, it was just, it was very cathartic. You got to release all of that because it was, they were trying to go so extreme. It was actually funny. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, most definitely.
And I think catharsis is very, very beneficial. So going through and watching those films, you watch it a second time and it's better for your control because now you know what's coming up. And I'll tell you a story. I actually got like the first copy of Friday the 13th. No, I'm sorry. Different movie. No, it was Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th, and the soundtrack wasn't on the DVD. So we just had the action and the story, and it was hilarious. It was not frightening at all.
I bet.
And of course, we immediately took it back to the store, and they said, well, that batch, all of them, we have to come back in a couple of weeks when they got their new ones. But watching it without the music was hilarious. We still had the dialogue, but no music. So, if you have a way to maybe cut down or lower the volume of the music, I think that might help deal with some people's anxiety associated with watching the movie.
Is there a way to, you're talking about seeking out your therapist to lower the anxiety before the actual day gets there, but is there a way to, much like with hypnosis, counter-program yourself with positive 13 messages before you get to the actual day of Friday the 13th?
that would actually be a very good cognitive restructuring process that you could go through, and maybe even start it, on the 31st of the previous month, so you actually get 13 days before the 13th. So, and do one every day and build up to it, and you'd be ready for it. That actually sounds like a really great idea.
Because I think to myself, and I even told you off air, and I've mentioned before on this program about I have my 17th great grandfather was the 4th Grand Master of the Knights Templar, Bernard de Tremblay, and so I he died in 1153. He lost his head at Ascalon. So for me, when I think of 1307, I kind of smile because to me, when people mention Friday the 13th and they try to mention Templar history with it really doesn't affect me all that much. That wasn't my part of Templar history. It was much later than my family's involvement in Templar history. But I know that it has some connection to Friday the 13th and the Friday the 13th lore. So it to me, I guess, when Friday the 13th has always had a certain meaning to me, but I never saw it as this terrifying day. I guess it was always just another day on the calendar to me. I guess I don't see it as spooky as other people see it, and I get the movie franchise really is what drove it home, I guess, for me. Why is it? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say. Well, think of, first of all, it's a phobia, and what is a phobia? It's an irrational fear. Okay. Sure. And if you think about rational fears, I'm in Texas. We have rattlesnakes. In fact, I had a friend who lost a dog, and another friend who had his 2-year-old daughter get bit by one this summer. Nice. Real life, potential, tragic, and very scary thing. I had my wife's grandmother was deathly afraid of snakes because of rattlesnakes. She grew up out in the country here in Texas, and we used to park our car under our trees so it stayed cool, and we would take little plastic rubber snakes, orange, purple, fluorescent green, and tie them to the branches that you could reach from the tree, and that would keep the birds from coming and sitting there at night and getting our cars all dirty, especially the windshield. But we had to change the snakes around about every 2 weeks. Well, Grandma come to visit, and she wouldn't get out of her car because of those snakes. And she was laying on the horn, and we're like, what's going on? And she's yelling at these snakes, and they're obviously plastic toy snakes. That is an irrational fear. So I don't think people necessarily get to pick what their irrational fears are. Does that make sense?
Right. But is there a way, or is it even possible for the human mind to eliminate all irrational fears? Are we not meant to eliminate these irrational fears?
Do we really need to? I mean, I had a patient several years ago who had a phobia about koala bears. Mm-hmm. Central Texas, she has a phobia about koala bears. Not a big deal. She'd been my patient for a while, never really came up. And one day she walks in and she's stressing out over koala bears. And I'm like, I don't get it. And she goes, her grandkids wanted her to take them to this park that it was like a zoo and an aquarium and all this kind of stuff. But they had an area where you could walk around with koala bears in it, and you could reach up literally. I mean, they were open. You could just reach out and touch them. And she was panicking. Why koala bears? She'd never been to Australia. I mean, what is it about koala bears? I don't know.
Could she have read a story about somebody's face being ripped off by one or something? I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe a rabid koala bear could do that. I don't.
Oh, they're very strong, and in fact, they. I mean, we laugh about it because they look cuddly, but they are quite dangerous.
Really? I've never. Oh yeah. I've never. Had a problem with that.
Dr. Hubert, Google it. I'm telling you, they are. They look quite cute and cuddly. They just don't sit there and get high off of eucalyptus leaves all day long. They do. They are quite dangerous. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they could rip your face right off.
I have to be faster than them, I guess, right?
Exactly. You just don't get close to them. You don't go up and give them a big old hug. That's the thing. I mean, because we as American tourists tend to be pretty stupid. I mean,
very, very, yeah. The truth.
My stupid thing is I eventually want a capuchin monkey.
Really?
I do. I am since I was a little kid, I've always been a huge fan of monkeys. I think they're great, but I keep being reminded that monkeys throw their own poop. And for some reason, people love to hit me up on social media, and they love to send me the stories of the one time a chimpanzee ripped the face off of somebody.
Right, but that's what they do when they attack. They go for the face and the hand.
Right, but that's a chimpanzee, or I think an orangutan once did it.
Orangutan does it too, yeah.
Right, but not a capuchin monkey. Okay, and we have friends that are part of Intrigue Theater who were just on Penn and Teller's Fool Us. They have Frankie, who's a monkey, a capuchin monkey, who's part of their act. Now, I know for a fact that Frankie's very difficult, and it's very difficult to train a capuchin monkey, especially in a magic act. But I seem to not want to care. I seem to want to put in the work on this deal. Everybody else.
Can I tell you my monkey monkey story?
Please do. I want to hear it. Yes.
Okay. 9 years old, 10 years old. My uncle, who lives in Colorado, he invited me to come spend some time while he was in college with him up, over the summer. Mm-hmm. So we go up there, and he takes me to Cheyenne Mountain Zoo in Colorado Springs.
Okay.
And they have this amazing mountain gorilla exhibit. And you can go inside the shaded room and stuff, and you can look at the monkeys, and they have these bars and this open area where the mountain gorillas couldn't get over. And there was this lady making all this fun of this monkey, and this gorilla, my uncle pulls me over and goes, "Now watch this." And I swear, this gorilla, when she turned away, he literally reached back and defecated in his hand. And he waited till she started turning, and he smacked her right in the face.
Attaboy.
Across this, and it was, oh my God, I still die laughing. I mean, and now we go back and they put glass up there. My kids don't believe me anymore that happened, but yeah. Like ask my uncle.
I still think there's some of the smartest creatures on the planet.
Yes, sir.
And I just think they'd be awful cool to hang out with. I don't know. That's just me. And people,
and I think they have a sense of humor.
Right. They have some of the richest sense of humor you could imagine.
Yes.
And people think I'm nuts because I want a capuchin monkey for a pal, not a pet, a pal. Just a pal to hang out with. Yeah.
Okay, just make sure he's not on a high fiber diet.
Right. Exactly. It's stuff that moves real slow through the digestive system. Slow that thing down to a crawl, And
exactly.
And plenty of Pampers around. I know that much.
Oh, definitely.
Most definitely. So essentially, in closing, Friday the 13th, get over it. That's what we should tell people.
No. What I think you should tell people is that relax. Okay. Some people may be afraid of koala bears and not Friday the 13th. So you shouldn't, be afraid to talk about it. But at the same time, if it's so debilitating that you can't go to work or you can't go to somebody's birthday party or you can't go, to your friend's wedding, you probably should go talk to a therapist and get some help because there's some real simple things. And you mentioned hypnosis. I think that's probably one of the best ways to deal with a phobia in general. It's quick and dirty. You can go in one session in most cases and it's over. So.
And if somebody finds out in hypnosis that they were a Templar that was killed back in 1307, and that's the whole reason for the Friday the 13th thing, then you got a whole nother set of issues.
Well, no, they need to call me because I'm working on this book. And
well, then there you go. Man, what's the name of the book, by the way? Eventually, when you come out with it,
I can't. I'll let you know.
Is it?
I don't want to give it away.
How to throw monkey crap in 3 easy steps? I'm just suggesting titles here. I'm trying to be pro.
Suggesting titles. Well, somebody sent me a book, The History of Flirting. I
really?
thought it was autobiographical. Yes, and the person says no, it wasn't.
There's a book named that?
Yes, sir.
I got to look that one up. Potential guest idea, I guess.
I think, no, not for me. I think it would be a potential birthday present for some of my friends.
There you go. Most definitely. Dr. John Huber has been our guest and probably the most entertaining guest we've ever had on Beyond the Darkness. Dr. Huber, thank you very much for being with us tonight and talking about Friday the 13th. I know amongst our audience, it's kind of like a second Christmas, but I know there are some people out there who tend to have that fear and that phobia, who just have a little bit of nervousness and anxiety about the day. And I'm glad that you were here to kind of talk them through it.
Well, I think with everything going on bad in this world, there's just not enough time for us to laugh. So if you can find a way to laugh, you're going to get through all your anxiety.
Very true. Very true. Folks, that'll do it for tonight's program. We appreciate you being with us again. Dave will be back on Monday, and